And we're ready whenever you are, Mayor.
Good evening, and thank you for attending tonight's City Council meeting. For those who are attending remotely, the camera in council chambers is set up to show those attending in person tonight. The platform we are using has a raise hand feature. You will notice a picture of a hand in the upper right-hand corner. When we reach the point in the meeting where the public has the opportunity to address council, you can click that button to be given your opportunity to address council. Before standing for the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, I would just ask those in attendance following the pledge for a moment of silence in memory of Joe Basta. Joe Basta recently passed away. He was a strong civic leader in our community. He served on various city boards, including the City Charter Review Commission and the Tree Commission, as well as his dedication to many social clubs. So again, a moment of silence for Joe Basta. So please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Tooley.
Here.
Councilor Selly.
Here.
Councilor Powers.
Here.
Councilor Scamperly.
Here.
Councilor Stevenson. Here. Councilor Trim. Here. Councilor Weaver.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. We have two presentations tonight. The first one will begin with Carrie Tuttle and Thomas Haynes from DANK to talk about water and sewer districts.
Mayor, as an introduction, economic development depends on infrastructure, both for businesses and for residences. Part of our growth strategy should be an expansion of water and sewer, but we need to do it smartly. And one way to do that is by forming water and sewer districts. So we asked our partners at the Development Authority to come in and give council and the public a kind of a 101 on forming water and sewer districts.
Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. And Kathy, you can go ahead to the next slide. So I thought I'd start out by explaining exactly what water and sewer districts are, just to make sure we're on the same page here. So a water and a sewer district are special districts that would be established by a town typically or a county. Cities and villages don't have water and sewer districts because the city itself limits is the quote unquote special district. But in towns and counties, often these special districts only encompass a portion of the town. So think about many of the towns that we have in our communities that have special districts. We'll say, let's take the town of Canton, for example. They have water and sewer districts that extend beyond the village limits. Potsdam, same situation out into the town. So there's many situations where you have towns where they may only have districts where they have areas that are adjacent to a village or a city where they're purchasing their water or sewer from that adjacent municipality. The other thing to keep in mind with districts is that only the residents of the district pay for the district's debt, the operation and maintenance, and all of the other costs of the district. So those districts are accounted for, if you will, separately from the municipality's general fund, separate from their highway fund or fire district funds or any other special districts that they have. Those water and those sewer districts are set up separately, and only those residents that receive the benefit of the district pay for the district. So in those examples that I explained, typically you don't run into that situation where you have a village or a city because everyone within those communities is receiving that benefit, and so they are all paying. But in the case of towns, very often only a small portion of the town would be in a district, and then therefore they would be receiving that benefit and have that service provided to them. The other thing that's important about districts is the formation process. So when districts are formed, they are initiated by the municipality. So the town board would actually take the action to establish a district. Oftentimes that happens when residents within the municipality petition the board and say, hey, we have this need and we would like to receive water or sewer. And so they may go to their town board and petition the board to establish a district or to extend the boundaries of an existing district. Sometimes these districts get formed and then time goes by and there may be development, which is what we hope. And then that district can expand and include additional parcels and development within the district, thereby adding more users to the district and being able to spread out those fixed costs, because most of the costs of operating any water or sewer system, as I'm sure the city council is aware of, most of those costs are fixed. Those costs include your labor expenses, and aside from overtime, which is usually fairly minimal, you have the same amount of staff, you have the same amount of fees that you have to pay for your Speedies permit. You're still doing all of the lab analysis regardless of what your flows are. That doesn't change. Those requirements from Department of Health and Department of Environmental Conservation don't change. Typically, we, on average, for the communities that we work with, those fixed costs represent 70 to 80% of the total operating costs of a district. And obviously debt, that's a fixed cost too for the term of whatever your loans are, which are typically 30 to 38 years. So more users in the district means that you have a lower individual cost per user. So we typically see, like I said, as those districts expand or there's opportunity for development, those costs can go down as additional parcels get added to the districts. So why would a town establish a district? Well, in some situations, what ends up happening, and the development authorities worked with dozens of communities over the last 30 years with multiple regional water and sewer systems. And in some cases, municipalities have extended usage to outside, we'll call them outside users. So these would be customers that are outside of their municipal boundaries, and those customers have not been in a district. So I'd like to kind of explain what happens, what we've seen happen in some of those situations when you have customers that are being served that are outside of a district and some of the problems that that can create. And then that will sort of set the stage for, you know, why there are benefits to creating these districts. So the first thing is that those districts actually protect the municipality for non-payment of services. So when a municipality provides services outside of its municipal boundaries and they have a customer that doesn't pay, they have no mechanism to re-levy those fees to the county and to be made whole. So in the case of the city, if you're serving outside customers and they don't pay, you can shut them off and they won't have service, but you still may be stuck with a bill, especially if it was, say, a larger commercial customer. You can't re-levy that because you don't have the taxing jurisdiction because that customer is not within your municipal boundary. If those customers were in a town district and you billed the town for those services, the town is responsible for billing its customers. When they don't pay, they re-levy those unpaid water and or sewer fees just like they do unpaid property taxes. The county then makes them whole. And so there may be some month period of time, you know, several months before that re-levy process happens through the county. That re-levy process does happen every year, and that municipality is then made whole for any outstanding payments. So communities can sometimes get in trouble here where, you know, they have a customer that's in non-payment, this goes on, they don't realize it, and then maybe they catch it and there's several $1,000s this customer owes. Maybe the customer was a commercial business, they went out of business, they filed for Chapter 11, whatever the situation might be. They're kind of stuck. They have no way to get those funds back, and then they realize that this is a situation, right? They usually don't understand that to begin with. The other thing that happens is that when customers are served through sometimes a written agreement, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really informal and you have these outside users that have service and they maybe got connected decades ago and there's nothing that really documents who's responsible for the infrastructure because the infrastructure isn't within the municipality that's selling the service. in the case of Ogdensburg, if you're serving outside users, that municipality or that infrastructure isn't within your municipal boundaries, it's outside. So if there's a problem with that infrastructure, who fixes it? That can get very complicated. And part of the reason why that gets complicated is because typically there aren't written agreements to specify, or if there were, they're not updated. And so these outside users sort of tend to grow over time. So, you extended service to this customer that was right on the edge of your property. This is usually how this happens, right? Like just outside the municipal boundary, the village says, okay, yeah, we'll serve you. And then the property owner next to him says, well, geez, I want service too. Can I get connected? And everybody says, sure. So then they connect in and they extend the line. And then another customer, and we've seen this happen in municipalities where now this 3/4 inch line that was extended to serve one customer is now serving 4 or 5 customers. And you have somebody who takes a shower in their upstairs bathroom and they don't have any water pressure. And then they're calling the municipality and they're saying, well, geez, okay, yeah, you don't have any water pressure because you have a 3/4 inch water line that's serving 5 homes. That's not going to work. Well, then they said, well, what do we need to do to make this line bigger? And then everybody kind of looks at each other and they're like, geez, I don't really know, because nobody's really clear on who owns that infrastructure. It was put in privately, it was extended, and it sort of ends up in this no man's land. And we had a situation in Clayton, actually, where the village of Clayton was serving the town of Clayton out by Bartlett Point, if any of you are familiar with that area. And the line kept getting extended and extended and extended, and we ended up with about 45 customers that were served off from this line. There was no Department of Health testing of this line because it wasn't in a public water system. The village and the town couldn't get any funding to upgrade the lines that were in this because it wasn't in a water district. And people were not, there were issues with the water quality, there were issues with the water quantity. And so we ended up having to go through a multi-year process to create a district with the town, bring those users into the district, and then we were actually able to apply for funding and go get grant funding. And we had to replace all of these lines because it was just a kind of cobbled up mess of, one property had service and then it subdivided, and now what was supposed to only serve one place was now serving 10, and there were easements and right of way was not that well documented. You can imagine what that looks like. And so these are the reasons why creating a district protects the municipalities, and it actually protects the customers as well, because those customers then, when there is a need for improvement of that infrastructure, there is a mechanism through the district to make sure that the cost of that infrastructure improvement gets shared equally amongst all of the users within the district that is being served. So again, those costs being split out amongst all those users, not, some neighbor trying to figure out, well, geez, I'm at the end of the line, so why do I have to pay for the rest of the line? Well, you're getting service just like all these other folks are. And so typically, again, what happens is over time, these things continue to expand. You continue to add more people on. When you only have one, it's not that big of a deal. But if you start to have economic development, which you want, you start to have requests for more service. It gets very complicated and hard to manage, and there isn't a mechanism by which to be able to cover those costs. Preventative maintenance is another thing. If you have a system and there are valves that need to be exercised annually, there's hydrants that are supposed to be flushed. Again, the DOH testing. When this infrastructure isn't in a district, that none of that may be happening because it sort of fits into this no man's land. Next slide, Kathy. So this slide actually just clarifies that the city does provide water and sewer service to the following outside customers of the city. And the table that's here just kind of breaks down the different categories of the customers that you have to kind of clarify what exists right now. So there are several town of Oswegatchie parcels, excluding the Ogdensburg International Airport, that presently receive services from the city. Those parcels are not in a district, And to the best of our knowledge, there is not a formal outside user agreement that exists between the city and all of those customers. Those outside user agreements would basically specify and clarify a lot of the things that I just explained, like what are the conditions under which you're providing them service and so on. I believe that we believe that the city is responsible for that infrastructure, or has historically provided what has been needed to do whatever fix repairs in that area, take care of any issues that may arise. And the way that those customers are billed is that those customers basically pay the difference between the city's tax rate versus the town of Oswegatchie's tax rate. And so they're not billed based on their usage, they're actually billed based on the assessed value of those properties. Then the second category is the OBPA airport. So fairly recently, the city entered into an agreement with OBPA to provide water service from the city. So there is an actual agreement that was executed. And they have requested from the city also to be provided with sewer service. The OBPA is charged the inside sewer or inside city water rate. And in terms of sewer, because the airport actually is outside of the city and their connection point won't be directly to the city, their connection point will actually be to the village of Heuvelton. That whole connection situation is still kind of up in the air, because bear with me if you will for a second, the village of Heuvelton, which is the third category here, the village of Heuvelton also has an agreement with the city. The village of Heuvelton's sewer service agreement specifies that the city would have to approve any additional users besides the village of Heuvelton if they were to connect to that system. So OBPA has now come to the village and petitioned the village and said, hey, we want to connect. And the village said, okay, we'll approve your connection, but the city also has to approve that connection. And so if the city approves that connection, as I understand that you have, with some stipulations, then they become a customer of the village of Heuvelton, not the city of Ogdensburg, because their discharge connects into Heuvelton's line, which then connects into the city. And so their flow is getting metered through Heuvelton's meter with the city. And that's how the city is billing Heuvelton. So kind of a point of clarification there on how that works, because they're not a direct connection. And if you would go to the next slide, Kathy, some maps that kind of explain this in a little bit more detail. So this map here, actually, can you zoom out a little bit?
Out.
Or you can scroll down. There's a legend there that I wanted to show folks there.
Yeah.
So the legend shows just the outside water users are in the blue hatched area, and the outside sewer users are in the green. If any of you use the GIS mapping for the city, we just updated this and worked with Shane, our GIS folks did. And so we've got this, and this actually shows up in your map viewer. And you'll be able to see this in a little bit more detail and kind of blow up and click on the parcels to see the owners and that sort of thing. But this essentially shows you that you have sort of the area on Route 12 kind of headed out of the city, west, and then you have the area that's kind of adjacent to 37, that's just outside of the city. Kind of those two regional services there that's kind of separated away from everything else is the OBPA that's sort of in the center of the map that is not contiguous with the other areas. And so you can see there a little bit of what we're talking about. Next slide, Kathy. So I'm going to turn it over to Thomas Haynes. Thomas is our Director of Engineering. He's going to talk about the pending requests and provide a little bit more detail on some recommendations and options to consider.
Good evening. So as Carrie mentioned, these pending requests are really what prompted the request for us tonight to come speak to council. As a refresher, in August of 2024, the council approved an agreement with OBPA to provide water service. In December, you approved an agreement, or approved the village to allow the connection of OBPA to their line with a few stipulations as far as timelines of certain activities. Coupled with that alone, the city probably could continue on status quo, even though it's not great. However, there is another request that is coming forward. As you're probably aware, the Ogdensburg City School is building a transportation facility that is directly adjacent to the on-ramp of Route 37. Kathy, if you could move ahead, please. This map shows the two parcels there. One is the OBPA, the airport that is currently served by the what is going to be the water line and the sewer line, and then we have not received the formal package for the school yet, but the proposed connection is kind of in the area of where that cursor is. And as you can see, this is the current agreement with OBPA has the city taking ownership of this water line that is now far exceeding outside of the traditional boundaries. And your DPW staff would be responsible for that if something would occur, along with it's directly adjacent to the village's sewer line. So you can move ahead, Kathy. Considerations. Option 1 is status quo. The city continues to provide these services on outside user case-by-case basis. Or option 2 is the city council requests that the town of Oswegatchie form essentially sewer district number 1, which would encompass those two parcels and relieve the city of the responsibility, because at that point you would go from, instead of having to deal directly with the parcel owners, it would just be the town. And there would be an MOU set up similar to what was done with the village of Hubleton that outlines the responsibilities, and also, as Carrie mentioned, would give you the option of guaranteed payment. So if you would bill the town of Oswegatchie for water, they're going to pay you, and then it's their responsibility to re-levy that in the future. So you could do that immediately, and then for the future, because that's relatively clean, not all the infrastructure is online yet. You already have the sewer service, the water service agreement with OBPA. It would be pretty simple to form that 2-parcel district on the town side. Future considerations would be to, as Carrie showed on the other map, form a water district 2 that would encompass all of the other parcels that are currently serve and receive water, and then you would also form a sewer district. They would also form a sewer district 2. Once again, would encompass those parcels that already receive service, or certain ones that have been identified that might be developed in the future. Now, you move to the next slide, please, Kathy. Factors to consider. I know it has always been a concern of the city of development outside of the city limits. If done properly, you can develop these agreements to address that concern of tax revenue while still receiving the offsetting revenue for water and sewer payments, guaranteeing you're going to get paid through the district. Your current plants have plenty of capacity to serve these outside districts. They have been serving these new users for several years, and the new requests that are coming in are not large requests. I think upwards of like 2,800 gallons per day is so far is the largest one that has come through. Most importantly, as the council is aware, there is a number of infrastructure challenges across the North Country. By placing that infrastructure into a separate district, that opens up a whole different pool of funds. And they're funds from the grant agencies that the city doesn't have to apply for. The city can focus on their projects. The town can focus on rehabbing the infrastructure in those districts. Another thing to consider is that right now there's a quick count. There's 30 parcels that receive service. As Gary mentioned, none of them have existing agreements. That creates a lot of administrative work for your staff when people call and figuring out, who owns what or what the problem is going, what issues are going on. That would allow you to go from having to deal with 30 different property owners to essentially 2. It would be the town of Oswegatchie to deal with the water and possibly the second sewer district, and then the village of Hubleton for the sewer district number 1. Kathy, if you could. Any questions?
Comments or questions from council?
I've got, well, I'm looking at just existing conditions,
Okay.
and it states that the outside users are billed a difference in the city's tax rate versus town of Oswegatchie's tax rate. I was under the impression from my last term on council that they were paying the city's inside water rate plus what the city tax rate would be based on their assessed evaluation. You've stated here that it's the difference between those two evaluations.
We do not have anything to do with the city's billing. This was the best of our knowledge of how this was set. If you may have more accurate information. We knew that was different than Hubleton, and we knew that it was based on their assessed value. But if they're being billed the assessed value plus the inside rate, that may be, we don't know that.
I just thought that's the way it was from previous thing, and I thought maybe you had something different that access to some knowledge that I
No,
didn't have yet.
we put this together and we ran this by the city manager, and this was to the best of our knowledge how billing. But again, a lot of this stuff isn't well documented, so there may be some things here that you all have some historical knowledge of that we don't.
We're learning that a lot of our previous agreements haven't been renewed in a timely manner, kept up to date, and it's caused some problems in some other areas also, but hopefully we can stay on top of this one. I think you've done a good presentation here, and personally, I'm in favor of the tax districts, but we got to convince the town of Oswegatchie.
One thing that I did want to mention, Thomas and I actually met with the town of Oswegatchie last week. They had a special meeting on Tuesday night to talk about this exact issue. And all of the counselors and the town supervisor are in favor of moving forward with this. If the council decides that this is what you want to do, they are in favor of proceeding with forming districts.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, please.
So, Carrie, this isn't new to you. I know we had this conversation probably 8 or 10 years ago when we were looking at a water district with the town of Hubleton, or the village of Hubleton, not the township, because we couldn't get enough people in the survey that would say, yeah, they wanted to do a water system, they wanted to go forward. One of the concerns I have is our commercial zoning in the city is much more stringent than our neighbors. And, I know we can charge a difference with that, but once you take those parcels and they become vacant because they now are built outside the city because they can access water and sewer. My research back then had been that you could do a zoning overlay in those areas so we can match our zoning for our commercial to that water sewer district. Is that still something that could be a consideration?
It is. There are a lot of ways to address that concern that City Council has. One would be through zoning. I mean, you hold the keys to the kingdom, right? So you get to make the rules under which folks connect. So if you think about that, residential development out, I give you an example. Back then, Jennifer, a developer was interested in purchasing a very large piece of property on the Oswegatchie River and subdividing it and building high-end homes. Those are people that would shop in the city of Ogdensburg. Maybe their kids go to Ogdensburg School District and they pay taxes. They're not competing with your existing commercial property. Win-win, right? But because there was an infrastructure there, that developer moved on and they stopped looking at that parcel. You probably run into this all the time in your line of work as well. So the zoning is a way to do that. Or if there may be other ways to do that where there's still flexibility within your agreement. You could specify that any connections that are classified commercial or whatever property class codes those properties end up being classified as, since we don't know what the ultimate disposition of these developable parcels are along 812 might be, you could maybe keep it more flexible, which would give you a little bit more room to not put a zoning layer over there and say, oh, this has to be commercial. And I also think that might limit how the property owners want to use their property. But if they have options, they can pick how they're going to use their property. If it gets used in a certain way, they're going to pay a different fee structure. You could set that up in your agreement with the town, and that would be established as part of the district.
So I'd be interested in if we decided to go forward with this discussion with some recommendations from the Development Authority of the North Country of what our opportunities would be to look at.
Absolutely. One of the things that I just wanted to point out, back on that option slide, if you could go back, Kathy, there's we kind of laid this out as you have this pressing issue that we need to deal with right now, which is the OBPA. And we're not recommending that one's pretty clean. You've already agreed to serve them. The issue is that they're not in a district, right? So our recommendation is to proceed with forming that 2-parcel district for the school and OBPA. That's very clean. It's very simple. It addresses this immediate concern. Get that established. Get all the framework set up that the town's going to need to get set up, which we would help them with. Like they're going to need to have a sewer use law, right? And it's going to need to match the city sewer use law. And they're going to have someone to operate the system, which they could contract with. They're going to have agreements in place. So even though it's a small 2-parcel district, it sort of creates all of the foundation that would be necessary to create water and sewer district number 2. So that addresses that immediate concern. And then through that process, that gives us time to build a relationship between the city and the town, establish those districts, and then look at the rest of this and these other parcels, and then move forward with exactly what you're talking about, Jennifer, kind of outlining the criteria that council would require, and then building that agreement to be able to address those other parcels that are existing, and also potentially look at additional parcels that, that's the other part of this, that future consideration part is when you do this for these other users, you may have property owners that say, geez, on the other side of 37, they don't have service right now. They've got these very developable parcels, but they don't have service. So, well, we want to be in the district too. So part of that water and sewer district, that future district would be surveying property owners and identifying what those district boundaries may be, because there may be other parcels that we want to include. And then we have to figure out, okay, if we're going to include these in the district, then you actually have to be able to serve them. So what upgrades are needed to the infrastructure? How many parcels are going to be in? What are the flow requirements? Is the main that goes under 37 big enough? Do we need another one? Then there's an engineering analysis that goes with this. But that, as Thomas mentioned, that funding, now you actually have access to funding where we could apply for and get funding to actually do this engineering analysis, figure out what's necessary to support these districts, and then move forward, in a very planned, proactive way to make sure we address council's concern, but at the same time are creating an opportunity for economic development that benefits both the city and the town.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else on council?
Yes. When you answered my question about the Oswegatchie Town Board, years ago, I know they weren't interested at all, but what about, are they interested also in developing, let's say, out 37 as well, anywhere around the city?
Yeah, they're really open. I mean, I think, we met with them for what? It was quite a long meeting. It was just,
no opposition against looking at this and, coming to the table with the city council to discuss it.
Okay. Another concern, I'm sorry.
We'll say like this discussion about the city's concern, they were receptive to that about that, whether it's through zoning or different rates for much property they acknowledge that it's going to come with this.
Okay, good. The only other concern I have, and I know you guys are fully aware, any new district has to have storm water separation, including the airport and the city school district, because already our system is way overtaxed, as you know firsthand. So
yes, that actually is a requirement of the DEC sewer use law. That is something that that's not allowed. It's a violation of the sewer use law, which which is required by Department of Environmental Conservation. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Would the, well, obviously, if we were to create districts, water and sewer districts, with the additional funding that you speak of through the state and federal government, and with the DEC acknowledging that that would be a potential good start for us to be able to separate our system. If we've got that, if we've got that mechanism for future funding down the road later, I mean, it's anything new, I understand, has to have a storm separation, which is great. But obviously, we've got, as you're well aware, we've got quite a bit of it here in the city that needs to be developed.
I think as you establish districts, what it does is it shows that the city is a regional supplier, like the city of Watertown, like the village of Clayton, like the village of Potsdam, the village of Canton, village of Governor, same situation. Town of Governor has, water and sewer districts on each end. But that regional supplier allows you to access different funding that you have than if you're just a single municipality providing service to your own customers. Just like with the sewer project, the city was able to access additional grant funds that you would not have been able to access had you not been supplying Heuvelton. So I see that the same way on the water side. I mean, you have a large pending water project, right, that you're considering. This would position you better to be able to show that you're serving multiple municipalities, because right now that doesn't really show that way, because these users are outside users. The state doesn't recognize them, basically.
In your opinion, how long would it take for us to establish this through engineering reports and project? I mean, what kind of time frame would we be looking at here?
So we gave the town a 6-month schedule is what we think is reasonable to do that water and sewer district 1, which that's really the heavy lift because of all of those foundational agreements. And then I think to do a second district, you'd need to factor in some time for some public meetings, to do surveys of the property owner. So you'd want to factor that all in, probably another 6 months to get through that process and form those districts that would allow for, because those property owners are going to have a say in those district boundaries. That's sort of a process that you go through to put the information out there, explain to them, if you're in the district, this is what you get, this is what it's going to cost you, and then do you want to be in the district or not? And you do those surveys, and then that's how we decide on what those district boundaries actually end up being based on those surveys. Because in order to form a district like that, more than 51% of the parcels within the district have to vote yes, they want to be in the district. So if you do the surveys and you're like 40%, well, you might look at, maybe we need to cut out, there's a bunch of no's in this area. So then that's how these districts actually get formed, is based on those survey results. Anything you want to add to that, Thomas?
No.
Carrie, wasn't that what we had done before, like 8 or 10 years ago? We did the survey and the survey numbers were so low that it wasn't necessarily that the town and the village were opposed to it. It was, we just didn't have the numbers to substantiate it at that time.
That's correct. We did a survey of all the property owners on the 812 corridor because we were looking at a joint water. At the time, Heuvelton was trying to figure out, they didn't have a sufficient backup well. So the study that was done was evaluating interconnecting with the city to see if the city could be their secondary supplier. And so there was a whole analysis that was done to look at that and to expand service into the town, because there were several property owners that were interested, but in that area, the survey results came back and there wasn't enough need that would have allowed for a district to be formed.
So it's very interesting then that we could actually do the survey and then carve out the district depending on the needs. That would be a good path forward.
Yes, and that, again, that's the typical process of how the districts get formed, is really doing those surveys, putting those yeses and nos on a map in green and red, and it sort of pops right out at you like, okay, we have a lot of need here. Maybe you have a lot of users that have poor water quality in a certain area, but the water quality from their well is good, for example, in another area. Districts don't have to be contiguous. So if you were going to serve, it doesn't mean that you have to serve every single parcel along the line. You could literally, have certain areas where there's more need, and that could be a district, and it doesn't have to be every single parcel.
Interesting. Thank you.
On slide 9, the economic development outside the city, the first bullet about done properly could address city's concern regarding what constitutes done properly.
I think that goes to Jennifer's comment about be it zoning and or establishing what your criteria are, like what's acceptable to the city to ensure that economic development doesn't harm the city. So if the city's concern is we're afraid commercial users are going to pop outside of the city because they're not going to pay the city tax rate, they're going to pay something significantly less than that to have the same business, which basically they're getting all the benefits of the city. Well, that's the done properly part. If that's the concern you're trying to address, there's ways to address that and still be able to form the districts.
Okay.
Or whatever other concerns, stormwater separation, right? How do you address that? They would have to have a sewer use law and they would have to meet the DEC requirements, which means that they can't have sump pumps connected. They can't have stormwater cross connections. So whatever those concerns are, that's the sort of done properly, is making sure that you have in your agreement and or their laws, which establish the district and how the district runs, that those issues are addressed.
Thank you. Next question probably is more for staff, and just doubling up on the question that Storm asked about the methods of billing for the town of Oswegatchie parcels. If it's stated as correct, it's the difference between the city's tax rate and town's Oswegatchie tax rate on assessed value. Is it the tax rate on assessed value and not necessarily their true value? Oswegatchie has a 92% equalization rate.
Do you have a quick answer for that, or something we want to?
It's just a curiosity question.
I made a note to look that up, and we'll clarify that for council.
Okay. So for management, what actions are needed from city council in order for you to pursue discussions with the town of Oswegatchie Bridgeport Authority School District to initiate a conversation about formation of the water and sewer districts?
Yeah, I don't think we need any particular legislative action at the moment. This was a first step and a kind of a, like I said, a 101 to get council up to speed on some of the discussions that we've had with OBPA and the school district. We've had positive conversations, and then development authorities followed up with the town and more positive conversations. So initial, as long as there's a consensus of the council to move forward to see if this is an opportunity worth pursuing. When we get into some of the details, it is pretty much all we're looking for at this moment in time. And then as time goes on and the details become more clear, obviously we'll approach council, keep them informed via old business, and then when there are times for legislative action, we'll obviously reach out and ask you to do so.
Okay, so is there any objection from council for these discussions going forward?
No objection.
No. And if the full council support, proceed with the discussions. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Carrie and Thomas, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Presentation. The next presentation we have is from Public Works Director Shane Brown regarding DPW staffing update.
This is just a smaller follow-up from Jennifer's question last month. So in 2025, Public Works along with Recreation have 31 positions budgeted. Back in 2015, those same departments had 43 people budgeted to fill positions.
What year?
2015, I went back 10 years. There's 23 employees in the street division, 6 in the water and sewer. As of January 17th, we'll be down 1 person in the water and sewer department. We are actively going through the list. We have 5 employees with less than a year in the job at DPW right now, and probably 2/3 of it are with less than 10 years. We are a fairly young department, as some people may have noticed over the last snowstorm. We just filled the head facility maintenance worker today, but that also leaves an opening now in the recreation director. He came across and wanted the other position. So we'll be starting tomorrow, putting an advertisement out for a new recreation director.
What was the position that you just filled?
Head facility maintenance worker, they're the one that take care of all the city buildings.
Okay.
It's a one-person job, not a one-person job. There's only one person that we have budgeted for that position. So that'll leave the opening there. That's where we're at. We have 2 employees, like I said, getting ready to take their road test. So that will bring us, hopefully everybody will have their license by the end of this month.
Shane, on water and sewer, did you say you're down one position or you're down to one position? There will be.
We'll be down one position as
We'll
of
be
this
down
Friday.
one, so it'll be down to 5. Okay.
The other thing I wanted to touch on was a little bit about the brush. I know you guys asked last fall for an update on last year's brush pickup. We spent 8 weeks picking up brush between 3 to 6 employees each day. The landfill is open every day from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. from April to December. We did the trial run in midsummer there through beginning of October for 8 weeks. We opened it on Wednesday evenings. 18 people showed up for the whole time frame, which helped those 18 people. Which alleviated some issues. By removing the midsummer pickup that we did, we paved 31 blocks this year. That's 5 more blocks than last year. These are just, we did a lot more than that. It also allowed us to start our catch basin cleaning, which we did probably 2/3 of the city. We have part of the second ward left to do in the Proctor Ave area, which helps with our stormwater issues and flooding. It's going to be a decision we're going to have to make. I'd like to see it away, keep the midsummer away. If we have to bring it back, we can't do it in July. We try to get everything paid before the Seaway Festival. That's a big push. I would like to try to leave it out this year and then possibly open the landfill on the 1st and 3rd Saturdays of the month, see if that works. And then with some new ideas of the enforcement thing that we've been working through with codes, see if a different approach helps the residents better. That's my ask. I understand if we have to do it differently.
Management will put together a more clearly defined brush policy proposal for council in the near future. But Shane wanted to share some of his thoughts and ideas. And just to show you the trade-offs and the balances, because if you wanted to do this with limited staffing, there are things you can't do. It's just the reality of the situation. It's not that we don't want to do it all, it's just we can only do so much.
Town of Messina, or the village of Messina, does a spring and a fall, and that's it. Nothing.
Yep, and they utilize their brush pickup with their, I don't know the right terminology for the employee, but they're the people that collect their trash. They have their own municipal trash. So when they're done the trash collection, those are the individuals that go out and collect their brush.
Well, Shane, I'm sorry. I thank you for this report because, we know that all our city staff have been doing more with less. And it's very difficult for all of you, but it's nice to hear the differences when we make decisions so we can make more clear decisions of what is the best interest of the city. So you've really outlined and clarified a lot of things. So thank you. And thank you to all your department for everything you do.
Anything else for Shane? Again, thank you, Shane, for the update.
Thank you.
We have 2 public hearings tonight. The first is regarding a local law to allow for changes in Youngsburg Municipal Code, Section 215, Sections 39, 40, and 41, entitled Water Rates. It is going to be bill number 1, and I'll open the public hearing now. If anyone attending in person would like to speak regarding the public hearing, please come down to the podium and you will have 5 minutes. Now, if anyone attending remotely would like to speak regarding the public hearing, please use the raised hand feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Mayor, I think Colleen. Get up and speak.
Yeah.
I'm Arlene Kaya, daycare provider. We got our letters Friday, so I'm assuming you all seeked legal advice from your city lawyer on the social service law, because we had no time to do anything with the letter until we had it in our hands that you were going to tax us. So we would like a copy of what the lawyer told you. And it's really interesting because in here, we have to check that it's a family unit because we have to live in our houses to run a daycare. So that would be our family unit. There's a lot of gray areas still. You guys need to change your codes more than just the one. We're not commercial. There's just too many loopholes. I can find gray areas just in the daycare providers. So I think you need to really look at this again because we would like the thing from the lawyer so we have it for our records too. Okay?
Thank you, Arlene. Now, again, if anyone attending remotely would like to speak regarding the public hearing, please use the raise hand feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you will have 5 minutes to speak.
I do not see any hands raised, Mayor.
So I declare this public hearing closed. The next public hearing is regarding a local law to allow for changes in the Augsburg Municipal Code, Section 177, entitled Sewer Rates. This is going to be bill number 2, and I will open that public hearing now. If anyone attending in person would like to speak regarding the public hearing, please come down to the podium and you will have 5 minutes to speak. Now, if anyone attending remotely would like to speak regarding the public hearing, please use the raise hand feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you will have 5 minutes to speak.
I do not see any hands raised, Mayor.
So I declare this public hearing closed. Brings us to personal appearance. At this time, if anyone attending in person would like to address council, please come down to the podium and you will have 5 minutes. Now, if anyone attending remotely would like to address council, please use the raise hand feature. The city clerk will recognize and unmute one person at a time, and you will have 5 minutes.
I do not see any hands raised, Mayor.
Brings us to correspondence. Do we have any correspondence this evening?
We do not.
Brings us to our consent agenda. That the claims is enumerated in general fund warrant number 1-2025 in the amount of $1,266,659.55, and library warrant number 1-2025 in the amount of $0, and capital fund warrant number 1-2025 in the amount of $190,764.39, and community development fund warrant number 1-2025 in the amount of $75.98, and community renewal fund warrant number 101-2025 in the amount of $0 as audited, being the same hereby are ordered paid. I so move.
Second.
Questions or comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
approved.
We have 2 appointments tonight. First, I will make a motion to appoint Renee Tebow to a 5-year term on the Augsburg Public Library Board of Trustees. Term to begin January 1, 2025 and end December 31, 2029.
Second that.
Questions or comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
approved.
Next, I make a motion to appoint Kim Weir to a 2-year term on the Augsburg Public Library Board of Trustees. Term to begin January 1, 2025 and end December 31, 2026.
Second.
Questions, comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
approved.
Items for council action. Our first item of business will be read by City Controller Angela Gray.
Good evening. This is a local law to allow for changes in the Ogdensburg Municipal Code, Chapter 215, Sections 39, 40, and 41, entitled Water Rates as dictated by the adoption of the 2025 budget.
I'll move that.
Second.
Questions or comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
approved.
Our next item of business will be read by City Controller Angela Gray.
This is a local law to allow for changes in the Ogdensburg Municipal Code, Chapter 177, entitled Sewer Rates.
I'll move that.
Second.
Questions or comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
approved.
Our next item of business will be read by City Manager Fonda Cronis.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement to assist the Planning and Development Office with planning board and general engineering support with MRB Group.
I'll move that. Second.
Would you like to elaborate on this, Fonda?
Sure, I'll be happy to. This and then the next item. We are without any staff in the planning department, and although I will do my best to keep the ship straight and the wheels turning, I don't possess the technical skill sets to be able to do technical site reviews and those kinds of things. And until we can find suitable talent and staff to come in, I'll need some assistance on that on a professional level. This is one of two contracts to do that.
Questions or comments?
Are both of these organizations basically doing the same function, or is there a separation of what they're going to, tasks they're going to be performing?
The charges that the city will incur will be on an hourly basis, and so I'll utilize one firm or the other depending on what the task is and what the expertise is depending on the firm. It's good to have a couple of options. Not everybody's good at everything, but having a well-rounded group of folks that you can call off the bench is important.
Other questions, comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
approved.
Our next item of business will be read by City Manager Fonda Cronis.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional service agreement for planning services with Labella PC.
I'll move that.
Second.
Questions, comments?
I'm just wondering, like, you advertise for these folks, they have references and things like that from other municipalities that you work with.
I've worked with these folks. They're experts in the area. They're well respected. I think the city's in good hands with these two groups.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Trim,
Yes.
Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
approved.
Next, I introduce a resolution to appoint a replacement Charter Review Commission member due to the resignation of Cindy O'Grady, and that the resolution reads that the City Council will hereby appoint Brian Gilbride to fill the vacancy on the Charter Review Commission. I so move.
Second that.
Questions, comments? Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, approved.
Our next item of business will be read by Chief of Police Mark Kern.
A resolution authorizing the police department to utilize funds from the forfeiture of criminal proceeds account and authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract in the amount of $11,080 for the purchase and training of a new canine officer. Whereas the Ogdensburg Police Department appoints a canine officer to assist in its efforts to provide law enforcement services to the community. And whereas the current canine officer is retiring and the Ogdensburg Police Department wishes to appoint a new canine officer. And whereas the cost of the canine officer and training is $11,080 in accordance with the attached proposal from Bohemian Canine. And whereas it is permissible by the Equitable Sharing Program guidelines to utilize funds from the forfeiture of criminal proceeds funds to pay for such expenses. Now therefore be it resolved that monies from the account of $11,080 be appointed from the forfeiture of criminal proceeds account line A2626 General Fund Revenues, and be it further resolved that $11,080 be transferred from the forfeiture and criminal proceeds account to the specialized equipment account line A312.240 to cover these expenditures.
I'll move
So
that.
moved.
Second.
I think the resolution is pretty self-explanatory. Any questions or comments?
Yes, Chief, I know you had a canine at one time, but would you just expand for us and the public, the process, timeframe, types of tasks that this particular canine is really trained to do?
Yeah, so this current dog's been in training. We selected this dog actually in May. We've been on the hunt for a dog because we knew our current dog is going to be retiring actually next week, Canine Schuyler. So we searched long and hard all across New York State and Pennsylvania. We came across this dog in early May. At that point, it was only about a 6-month-old puppy. Had all the drive and everything we were looking for in a police dog. So it's been training ever since then. It's a very lengthy process to, this is not a household pet. It's going to be looking for our lost loved ones, looking for criminals, and searching for illicit narcotics on our city streets. So it's got to be the best of the best and perform to top levels. So we're hoping it will do just that. It will be a black lab. And its name will be Reed, named after Sergeant Scott Reed. So we're very happy to do that in his honor. Andrew Lang, one of our patrolmen, he's one of our senior patrolmen. He is got 6 years on the job. He's been selected to be our new handler moving forward. So this is a Bohemian Canine. The owner there is Christina Klimova. She has actually been doing our maintenance training for free for the last year. We've worked with her since I had a canine, so we're going back about 12 years. She's very reputable. She produces a lot of police dogs across New York State for a lot of agencies, and they're all doing great work. So I have no doubts that this dog's gonna be good for us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
And just so the public knows, you are our first canine officer, correct?
That is correct.
Kodiak was our first officer dog.
That is correct. Nope, so this will be our third dog. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quite a tribute to Officer Reed.
Surgeon.
Yes, it is. Yep. Yeah, we're very happy to do that.
Very nice.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Tulley,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
approved.
That brings us to old business, and we will begin with City Manager Fontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I begin, I just want to take the opportunity to introduce our brand new Director of Finance who started on the 2nd of January. Jennifer Wilson right there. Can you raise your hand and say hello to the group?
Welcome back, Jen.
Welcome, Jen.
I saw her sneak in, so I figured we should do an introduction. So council should be aware that the city entered into a consent order with DEC to make various repairs on its stormwater and wastewater system. City has over the years made many of those rehabs and upgrades, but there are a couple that remain. And they've kept me up late at night trying to figure out how we were going to pay for this thing. And I have to admit, we received a Christmas miracle of sorts. We received a letter on the 3rd of January with a 50% grant, 50% 0% interest loan through the bipartisan infrastructure law for rehabilitation of the South Water Street and heavy industrial pump stations. I want to make sure that council is okay with me moving forward, just getting a quick consensus of this. I don't think we're going to get a better deal or a better grant. We are up against it from a scheduling standpoint to complete on time consent order. There are probably no extensions to that. As I understand it, we've probably used up every extension excuse in the book. And I think we're right up against it. Getting 50% grant, 50% zero interest loan, I think is as good as we're going to get. I Just wanted to make sure council was okay with me moving forward on that before I signed off on this.
I think we have to move forward. And,
I agree.
Not only am I okay, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than the potential penalties if we don't get it done.
Right. It doesn't mean we're not gonna stop looking for more funding. That's right.
Correct. So, there isn't a lot of time because we have to have this completed by the end of 2026. So we will take another shot at the apple for this CFA round. We got lucky. And but, you know, this is as good as I think we're gonna get, but we'll keep trying. But this is pretty good. This is a pretty good outcome. Considering December 31st, we had $0.
The timeline suggested, should we consider accelerating it in order to meet the deadline of completion by the end of 2026?
We are going to have a conference call with the SC, and we'll get all of our dates and all of their requirements really set out on paper so we understand it. We'll continue to update council on that, and if we need to adjust our dates to get through whatever we need to get through from either the funding side or the regulator side, we'll make sure that happens.
Okay,
We're not,
thank you.
I don't think it's worth giving up this money to extend time, those kind of things.
I was thinking about further extensions. I was just thinking the timeline of beginning engineering or complete engineering plans by January 1 of 26, have the work done by the end of 2026. Knowing how projects go at times, I'm wondering if that's too tight a timeline, whether we should have the engineering done.
Well, what we're going to need to do is probably work dual track on the engineering and then working on the grant funding side of it so that the grant contract can be completed at the same time as the engineering is completed. So the money's there, the engineering's done, and we'll have the year 2026 to do construction. And I'm told that should be enough time.
Okay.
And, you know, if indications from the engineering folks dictate otherwise, we'll make adjustments into that schedule.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this subject? Okay. Any other old business for council tonight?
I guess I would have one. We are still getting strong odors from the wastewater treatment plant. How are we moving along with rectifying that for final solution?
Well, I would say this, I think that a lot of the solutions have moved forward and we're in a much better place right now than we were, say, 2 months ago or 3 months ago. We actually had last week one of our quarterly meetings with the Development Authority focused specifically on the wastewater treatment plant. They report that the plant is healthy and operating within the guidelines and parameters set by the DEC. They did, however, report that on occasion, there are strong odors that do get produced. Now, part of this is the normal course of doing business with a wastewater treatment plant, right? You can't always control the exact type of waste that comes in, and sometimes that will upset the plant to a point where it adds, you know, some odors. Sometimes those things can't be helped, but there are some specific upgrades that the Development Authority has been working on as our continued effort to improve our operations. What I can report to you is they're experimenting with some different waste profiles and some different chemicals to use at some of the source of where the wastewater comes as opposed to when it gets to us. Those are some testing and some experimenting that continue. We're hopeful that that will make a difference, especially when the weather does get warmer. The other thing is that we're reviewing and updating our significant industrial user permits to maybe more closely define and more tightly define what the waste contributions can be and what the limits are. And as we do that certainly helps us to mitigate some of that. So the plant is in better shape. We recognize that there are some odors that do come on occasion, and the Development Authority and the city are working together to try and address and be better as time goes on. I think we're better than we were. We had certainly a significant problem with the wastewater treatment plant that's behind us, and it was absolutely unfortunate, and I do feel terrible for those who were affected by it, and we will continue to work to be better at it.
And so we're still on track for the agitator that with that one tank that we were looking at doing?
Correct.
Yes, so that's still coming in the spring probably.
Yeah. Well, the spring for commencing construction, and then however long that's going to take.
Good. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
course,
I know they've been working hard on it.
they are.
You all have been.
Any other old business? I do have a couple of items. First, we have had activity since the last city council meeting pertaining to home businesses and the associated water and sewer user fees. So I'd ask the city manager for an update on what's transpired since our last meeting.
Certainly, thank you, Mayor. Since last transpired, the city has identified and sent 33 letters to potential home businesses. That letter specifically identifies the properties as a potential home business, and by that I mean commercial, residential, mixed structure as defined in the code. It asks property owners to review the definition and determine if their property qualifies as such. Requires a notarized attestation of the property owner's determination. And those attestation forms are due to City Hall through 3 different methods by the 31st of January. A no response, right, not returning an attestation form automatically becomes a yes. Staff has also determined a quarterly process to identify additional home businesses. And when I say home business, I do mean commercial, residential, mixed structures. And it will have a similar process with a letter and attestation form. It's important for the public to know and for council to know that getting a letter doesn't mean that you've been designated a commercial, residential, mixed structure. It simply asks you to identify yourself as either one or not one and to return it and to attest one way or the other. The letter does ask the owner to determine that designation and report back to us. Once the attestation is returned, we can adjust rates properly.
Questions or comments from council? So this is consistent with the plan we'd set in place after we finalize our discussions and actions on the code and the regs. Correct.
I have a question. Simon, is there any question of people they know and then there's some later determination that property is mixed?
So there's no way for the city to go in and inspect these properties. This is still America, and we just can't walk in. But if there is some circumstance or situation where it comes to light with evidence that someone attested incorrectly, we can certainly retroactively charge down the balance of what they should have paid versus what they did pay. Most of what we do in municipal government is voluntary compliance, right? We ask people, even your income taxes in general, a voluntary compliance thing. We trust that our citizens are going to do the right thing, answer the right questions, and in circumstances where they don't and where we have evidence to the contrary, we will certainly at least seek the balance of what they should pay versus what they did pay.
Oops. All right, the other piece I have involves the city's code of ethics, and this is a little bit lengthy. Revisions to the city code of ethics approved by city council at its October 28, 24 meeting established a board of ethics. Section 2723 of the code provides for the board of ethics to promulgate its own rules and regulations as to its form and procedures. So in other words, how it will operate. To aid the Board of Ethics in adopting its rules and regulations, I sought guidance from the New York Conference of Mayors. NICOM's legal staff provided me with rules and regulations for the Board of Ethics in the cities of Rensselaer and Cohoes to help me draft rules and regulations for our board's consideration. Upon completing a draft, I submitted it to the city attorney for review. The response I received from Mr. Goldie was that the draft rules and regulations I shared with him included powers and duties beyond that authorized in the city's code of ethics, sections 27-22. The draft rules and regulations I initially prepared gave the Board of Ethics the power in part to conduct investigations and hearings on complaints it received, and the power to recommend disciplinary action and initiate appropriate actions proceedings. These powers are not currently authorized in the city's code of ethics. A power authorized in the city's code of ethics provides the Board of Ethics to render advisory opinions to the officers and employees of the city of Ogdensburg upon request. For example, a city officer or employee might inquire of the Board of Ethics if a certain action they were considering violated the code. Tonight, I seek guidance from the City Council and City Administration regarding the powers and duties delegated to the Board of Ethics in the city's Code of Ethics. I think any amendments we might consider in the code will be driven by the rules and regulations the board will adopt, which is their responsibility under the code. Such rules and regulations I would like us to draft for their consideration. To that end, I asked the city manager, after his review of this initial draft of the Board of Ethics Rules and Regulations, to offer input as to what powers or duties he recommends are delegated to the Board of Ethics and which powers and duties might be retained by the city manager or city council. Fonda has provided us with his suggestions as to how we proceed to deal with ethical complaints filed against city officers or employees. My hope tonight is that we come to consensus as to the framework for dealing with these ethical complaints, so we can determine if powers and duties currently in the City Code of Ethics requires amendment, as well as to drive the language in a second draft of Board of Ethics Rules and Regulations to recommend to the board when it holds an organizational meeting. Target dates to move this along. Conclude discussion on the subject either tonight or at the January 27th City Council meeting. Adopt a resolution at City Council's February 10 meeting for a public hearing on February 24th to amend the Code of Ethics if needed, and then adopt any proposed changes on February 24th. So a little bit lengthy, but basically, I worked from what NICOM provided me, and the Code of Ethics in those cities is different than the Code of Ethics in what we adopted with regards to powers and duties. So, and I didn't want to leave it to the committee to go out on their own and try to develop their own rules and regulations. I thought we should try to, have something for them to look at and consider. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion with how the council would like to proceed with any input provided by the city manager.
So I read Fonda's input, and I think he's right on the money in terms of powers and how things should proceed in terms of the city manager maintaining his chain of command. There's no doubt if there's complaints against the city manager, these go to us because obviously we're his boss, and any complaints involving city council should certainly bypass city manager because that would put him in conflict of interest and be referred directly to the Board of Ethics for review. The questions I have beyond that, when I'm looking at the recommendations that you sent us, if you look at Part B, and I'm looking.
The draft rules and regulations that you're speaking to?
Yes.
Complaints and investigations.
Correct. Down on B1, upon receipt of a form duly sworn by a person requesting an investigation of an alleged violation, I get it, right? But then it says, or upon the board determining on its own initiative. To me, that's a little bit confusing that the board is just on its own looking for ethics violations. And I question whether or not that's necessary or even should be in there. As a system of checks and balances, if there's no complaint, then why would the board just act on its own accord looking for violations? And so I just question that one section so far, the board determining on its own initiative without having a sworn affidavit or allegation. Am I reading that correctly? That the board could just do that on its own?
Again, that was, drafted using the language that was shared with me by NICOM.
Right.
I guess my thinking is, if if a board member becomes aware of a possible violation, that they could bring it to the attention of the board on their own without necessarily having to file a complaint as a citizen. But I don't think it would impede, if this language would remain.
Right.
I don't think it would impede the board to remove that sentence that you're referring to, and then it would be up to a board member to file a complaint.
Okay.
You know, so it could be achieved through another avenue.
Right, right. So that was a point of sort of contention with me. I'm just, considering, and here's our deal, right? I mean, we've all witnessed it, except for Fonda, didn't have the pleasure of witnessing 4 years of what we all witnessed, whether you're sitting here or sitting here. You have this fear, right? And this, honestly, it's what it is, a renegade board or a renegade council or a city manager, so to speak. And I think I probably read these over several times. You have that in you where you're really leery about giving too much power to one entity. And I guess a checks and balances is what I'm looking for. And so if everybody can think about that line right there that I just pointed out, when we have further discussion on this, do we want to leave it or not? That the board acts on its own accord without an outside complaint.
Well, again, and this language would only be up subject to discussion if it was the consensus of council to allow the Board of Ethics to conduct complaints and investigations basically on any complaint filed, as the first draft states. You know, if we would make a decision, let's say, to move to a different model or a proposed framework such as that suggested by the city manager, then in effect, section D probably becomes moot.
Okay. Yeah. But I really, I strongly support everything Fonda said. I think he's right on the money with his arguments. And I'm going to end my commentary right there.
Okay. Anyone else?
My thoughts on this board is that it should be advisory in nature. If somebody has a question regarding conflicts of interest, they should have investigatory powers. I don't really care whether they pick it up on their own or whether it's referred to them through a complaint, but they should have the power to investigate and make recommendations. But I think the power for discipline for employees needs to stay with the city manager. And as far as elected officials, that needs to stay with the city council. That being said, if the ethics board is doing an investigation, whoever the actual person that would be doing the discipline or having a disciplinary power should be in the loop and aware that such an investigation is going on. It shouldn't be something that's done totally in secret and all of a sudden we come to a meeting and there's a recommendation that we take action against somebody and nobody knew anything about the suggestion or the charge or what was going on. I know the charter says that the city council has the power to expel or keep counselors on and determine, they have the sole discretion to determine what constitutes grounds for removal.
Right.
But I think that would be much easier if we had this committee saying, we think this person is way out of line, or we don't think this person was out of line in this case. I see one of the situations where one of our neighboring communities is going through right now with an ethics complaint. And it's really stirring things up. And it seems to me there was just a lot of politics involved before they even referred it to the ethics committee. And I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but that's the purpose of the board, is to do an investigation. Or what I see this board to do is to do an investigation, make a recommendation. And then we have to make the tough choice. The manager has to make the tough choice based on that recommendation.
Thank you, Storm.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Storm and Dan on both aspects. You know, I mean, every committee is, you know, and we're grateful for the people that serve on our committees on a voluntary basis. But, you know, going forward, I agree with Storm 100% that it's a recommendation and empowering a committee of any kind of takes away the whole election process here for us, right? You know, and as elected officials. So it's I didn't anticipate this being a slippery slope as much as it turned out to be when I asked for this, but I do think it's necessary, and I Fonda did a great workup, and I tend to concur with pretty much everything that he's put forward, and you know, it has to be vetted closely, and all aspects of it looked at. So.
Thank you, Mike. Jenna?
So I believe that we do need the ethics board. I think that we need to be very careful in the powers that we give to them. I do agree with Dan that I'm a little concerned that something could just go forward without having an actual formal complaint, whether it be from a member of the board of ethics or from an individual employee, whomever it may be, a member of the public. Because so many times things are checked out beforehand and it may not be public knowledge that something was vetted through another process or already discussed or already solved. So I do agree that anyone that would have something like that, a conflict of interest or character, something, that they need to be aware of that. So there could be maybe a quick explanation in it and it's all solved and decided. So we do have to look at this very carefully because we can't let it become a political method of doing something. So while we need this, we need to be very careful in what we craft, because right now we have the people that are on this board that have been stepped up when we asked them to be appointed and are doing this. But this is something that's going to live past the members of this ethics board. It's going to live past our council, most likely. So we have to be very careful in how we craft this and what we do. So it's good for us to have these open discussions so that the members of the public can come to us and give us their opinions. And we do know, to Dan's point, we do know what happened in past administrations. And we know that some of the issue was that we had complaints with harassment or issues against our city staff, and that if the buck stopped at the person that was making the decision, that was actually the person that was possibly involved in that. So we need to be very careful how we do this so that everyone feels comfortable being able to come forward, but yet there still can be defense of that. I know it's roundabout where I'm going with that, but this is still very concerning that we just make sure this is right. There can't be a lot of open-ended portions of this. It's got to be very concise, very clear.
Thank you, Jen. Mike, you got it?
I'm on board. I agree with Dan. I agree with him. You told us.
So let me suggest this, and then after I offer a suggestion, I'll ask Fonda to comment. Okay. It seems that overall there's general support for the proposed framework that the city manager has presented to us. And in brief, when a complaint is filed for an ethics violation, if it's related to a city employee, then that complaint form will be routed to the city manager to deal with. The city manager retains the right or the opportunity, if he chooses or she chooses, to refer the matter for Board of Ethics for review. But ultimately, any final action in the case falls back to the city manager to implement. Any complaint regarding the city manager will be addressed to city council, and then it's up to us whether or not we decide to route that to the Board of Ethics for evaluation and input before we move to take any action. Any complaint regarding members of the city council that would bypass the manager, bypass council, and the complaint form will be filed directly with the Board of Ethics for review and recommendation. In that case, they can perform an investigation to determine, to form an opinion with regards to the claim that's been filed. One area that I haven't identified in any of this is the deal with complaints, ethical complaints against members who are officers of boards or commissions. I think those should route to city council first, and then we can make an evaluation to route it to the Board of Ethics. So in that case, we would treat it the same as a complaint filed against the city manager. And then what's not addressed, at least I don't believe in anything I've shared with you or Fonda shared with us, but it's been brought up tonight and I think needs to be factored in, is the manner by which an individual is informed that a complaint has been filed against him or her. So we'll need some advice on that in an effort to be transparent with those individuals and as appropriate with council management and or the public. One item to maintain in their rules and regulations, I believe, would be the requirement for a year-end report from the Board of Ethics to council, as is included already in the language. So is council supportive of that outline, which I think is the framework basically that the city manager is recommended to us? Everybody support?
Yes.
Okay. Any additional comment you'd like to offer, Fon?
The only thing I would add is we probably want to do some work on the, when you talked about the manner which a complainant is informed. We can certainly reach out and get some legal opinions on that. There may be a labor legal portion to that, and then maybe just a general legal portion of that. So I can get that ball rolling if the council watches.
I mean, I did share with council, and I thought with you, a draft complaint form, again, modeled after Rensselaer and Cohoes, and based on our discussions tonight, that might be modified, but that might serve as a starting point to evaluate with management and the city attorney.
Okay.
So I think the next move for council's perspective is to have the city manager discuss this with the city attorney and come back to us with a recommendation for revision to the Code of Ethics if needed. I'm not sure if the language needs to be amended based on the rules and regulations we're going to suggest to the board, as well as a drafting of rules and regulations for the board based on the framework you've outlined for us. And my goal remains to have this all put to bed by the second meeting in February, so that in early March we can have an organizational meeting with the ethics board, and they can adopt rules and regulations either as we suggest or as they might revise, and then up and running. And whatever form that is established or developed for individuals to file complaints, we can make available to the city clerk's office and post on the city's website as well. In terms of where a complaint form is filed, I don't know if it's appropriate to have it filed initially with the city clerk, and then the city clerk can route it to the city manager as appropriate, or to the mayor as appropriate, or to the Board of Ethics chairperson as appropriate. It seems reasonable. But it's something we can have further discussion on.
And I would think to that point, I think we should have a two option. I love our city clerk, but if someone is not comfortable with that, going through that, there should be a second option because it may involve a future city clerk or something. So I think we should have a second option besides
Yeah.
just one.
We'll need that, yes. Okay, so I think good conversation on that topic today. Yeah, it certainly created a lot more to think about when we got the city attorney's response to the initial draft, which I'm thankful for, quite honestly.
Mhm.
All right, any other old business? All right, that brings us new business. Does anyone have any new business? Brings us to items for discussion. Does anyone have any items for discussion this evening?
I have 2 items, Your Honor.
Please, Jen.
The first is just awareness. Fort Representation is doing their annual dinner and honoring a lot of volunteers this Friday night. The dinner is 6 o'clock, 5:30 cocktail hour. Tickets are available on their website, fort1749.org. It's a great event, lots of ways to support the fort. That gives us a beautiful piece of land to use for our citizens and for all of us. The second item would be, I had a couple of citizens ask me about the chargeback portion on their city tax bill. That also includes the county part. I asked a few questions. I was directed to someone at the county, not the treasurer's office, but someone at the county, and I've never received a call back. What is the chargeback portion of the city tax, of the county tax bill? What does that cover?
I'm going to take a stab at it and then I'll let Angela fill in where I work. Chargebacks are services that the county provides the city, and instead of billing us and we write a check for them, they just put it on the tax bill. They are generally services like the election, the cost of elections, running elections. There are some real property costs, assessment costs. There's another big one.
Workers' comp.
Thank you. That's the big one, the workers' comp. Yep, and community college. Yep, those are generally the chargeback amounts.
Thank you. I knew what the overall arching chargebacks were, but I just didn't think of the specific ones for the city of Ogdensburg. Okay, thank you so much.
Any other items for discussion? I do have one. Received a letter dated January 6th from the North Country Regional EMS Council, which serves Jefferson, Lewis, and St. Lawrence County. And they addressed it to what may concern, but it was addressed to the mayor. Wanted to inform us that North Star Health Alliance has submitted an application for the North Country Regional Emergency Medical Services Council for approval to operate an ambulance service within North Star Health Alliance facilities or campuses within Jefferson and St. Lawrence counties. In order for the North Country Regional Emergency Medical Services Council to approve this application, North Star Health Alliance must meet the definition of public need, which can be found in New York State Department of Health Policy Statement 06-06. It indicates there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, February 4th, weather date Thursday, February 6th in Gouverneur. Anyone planning to speak at the public hearing, you'll need to register upon arrival. And there's a time limit we put in place for those wishing to speak. Anyone wishing to make written comments on the application may do so by sending them to the North Country Regional EMS Council. Any written correspondence should be received by the close of business on Monday, January 27th. So I share that information with the public. In regards to council, at its October 15th meeting, council chose not to offer an opinion of support or opposition to North Star Health Alliance's request to operate an ambulance service. But I bring this letter to you tonight to let you know the application has been filed and just to see if the council had any interest in offering written correspondence in regards to this, or whether you want to remain with no position on the application.
I would prefer to remain with no position on those.
I mean, it's consistent with the approach we took on the 15th, and I viewed that. I was not at that meeting, but I did view the meeting and listen to the discussion presentation made that night by North Star, and then to follow up non-committal by council about the request. Okay, so council will take no position, but again, the public is informed that The application has been filed and there's an opportunity to comment on it if you choose.
Mayor, I have an item if
Yes,
you're set.
yes, please.
Okay. I'm seeking additional council support or at least concurrence on an item. If council would recall, there is a proposed project for the East David Street Water and Sewer reclamation and rehabilitation. It's a $4.5 million project. The city has received significant grant funding for the sewer portion, but none for the water portion. And we are kind of up against it from a time expiring for the grant standpoint. If you break up the sewer portion of it, it's $2.6 million. The water portion is $1.9 million. We've received 75% funding for the sewer portion, leaving a local share of $651,000. Not too shabby off a $2.6 million project, but the entire water portion of that remains unfunded. So we got creative, and I'll give Shane some credit there. On the water side, it is possible for us to be able to do that work in-house. That will significantly decrease the cost of that. We think from a material standpoint, probably about $250,000 in costs. City staff would obviously do the work, and so those salaries are included in the 2025 budget. I would propose, if we were to move forward, probably funding that materials through the water fund balance. The trade-off on doing that is that we wouldn't do very much paving in 2025. As far as the local share on the sewer side of things, we do have one more grant round to go to try and get this $651,000. It's also possible that we could utilize CHIPS money for a portion of that. There may be additional unidentified grants. Then we have fund balance and bands to do that. Before we give that $2 million back to the state, I wanted to give it one more chance to figure out how we could get creative and still do this project. But the funding deadline is coming up. I hate to give back $2 million. We've tried to come up with a reasonable way forward. There is a trade-off in 2025 as far as getting roads paved versus doing this project. And I just saw some consensus with council on how they wish to move forward on this.
I think it's very creative myself. I read your detailed letter and I think it's something that we have to do again without forfeiting $2 million. We know the project's got to get done. And I applaud staff for stepping up with the ideas.
Yeah, that's all Shane. He deserves all the credit for this one.
So that's where I stand. I say let's move forward.
So what I'm hearing is that the worst case scenario is we do no paving that year. But if we are able to get more funds, then we could possibly put some more paving back into the time frame.
I think the question is, do we have the capacity to do some paving along with this? Because we get about $1 million in chips a year. Worst case scenario on usage is we'd use $651,000 of that. Best case scenario on the grant side, worst case scenario on the paving side is you burn off significantly more than 2/3 of that on that. And that still is going to leave you some paving money. But the question is, do we have the ability to pull that off from a
staffing
standpoint? Yeah.
Do we roll chips over yearly? Do we have a balance with chips?
You haven't had, I think our council shares
Okay.
only go so much and go over 18 months.
It's a great work up here. With that being said, what were we, any idea what we were looking at as far as paving this year?
Yeah.
So fair to say it's probably the same every year. You're milling street, certain aspects of streets.
I hate to see us fall behind on the street maintenance, but I think this project is more important to get this done. And I support the plan. I just hope it's not going to lead over to more than 1 year, reduced paving process. If we don't do the paving, do we stand to lose anything by not doing that as far as potential grant money or anything?
I don't know if I understand the question. Can you
Do we have any obligations to complete things, or if we don't do any paving, would that affect our ability to get grant money next year for paving or CHIPS money or anything along those lines? I'm not real familiar with how those programs work.
No, it's an annual appropriation from the state, and we generally get the same amount, and every so often they increase the limits. So we can roll over what we don't use, which is how we were able to make a large equipment purchase this year, is because we had rollover. So any balance that we can't get due to capacity issues, we can do the next year.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
And so that project will involve some paving because we're basically going to dig up. So we're going to use some of the CHIPS funds right there. Most likely that would offset some of ours.
Yeah, if we can't get outside grant funding to do some of the sidewalks and some of the curbing and things, we would probably utilize CHIPS. Did I say that right, Shane?
Yeah, they'll cover sidewalks, curbing, blacktop, and portions.
Can we make it a water sewer district?
Harry said no.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, are we at this
We can certainly come up with the 651,000. I'm not worried about that. But this is a timing thing, and we need to move forward relatively quickly. This is an EFC sponsored grant, and they have certain procedures, and our deadline is a March 1st to get moving and moving forward. And so I wanted to make sure that before I did so, that council was okay with some of the trade-offs we're going to have working here off of this decision.
So the scope of the work, you know, the digging and the new infrastructure for East David, it's not going to have any, and obviously CHIPS can be used for that.
Yes.
Right.
For portions of the project, yes.
For portions. All right.
They can't do the water, they can do some of the sewer.
Okay.
So that
Good.
would be part of the $650,000.
Well, not the water portion.
Not the
water-
water portion,
yeah.
but the CHIPS funds could be used for that part of the work.
Potentially, yeah.
To answer Donna's question. Okay.
Yeah.
And also our time and our effort with our salaries and stuff would be part of that 650,000?
Could be,
Yes.
depending on, how
'Cause we're
we
doing it
break
in-house.
things up, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want everybody to understand, we just don't have $650,000 laying in our coffers to say we're going to use that today. That it's a lot of different pots that will help with that.
Okay, and so, council supported your recommendation. I mean, the project will be completed in 2025?
The water portion, likely 2025, and then the sewer portion, they'll come in behind it and do it in 2026. Okay. I get that right?
So we should
So good
expect.
window. We got a good window for grant processing as well.
We've got one year
One
to see
year.
everything done.
All right,
Okay.
good.
So this project will involve that area being in somewhat construction mode for 2 seasons?
At least a season and a half.
Just to set expectations correctly.
But boy, when it's done,
I know, it'll be nice. We definitely need it. I lived on Elizabeth Street when we did the project there, so that was.
Thank you, Fonda. Any other items for discussion? All right, so with that brings us to citizen participation. At this time, if anyone attending in person would like to address council, please come down to the podium and you'll have 2 minutes. Now, if anyone attending remotely would like to address council, please use the raise hand feature. The city clerk will recognize and unmute one person at a time, and you'll have 2 minutes.
The first individual is registered as Greg McNamara, and I will unmute that individual now. It appears you are self-muted, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, I've been watching the meeting tonight. I wanted to call in and make a couple points. First of all, I believe the city attorney should have been present tonight for a couple different reasons. Number one, the water scenario there and the situation with that and the charges and the letters being sent out. He should have been there to talk about that and whatnot, and for citizens to show up there and ask for his opinion on it or a letter from him. That just raises some questions. I also believe that he should have been there tonight for some of the discussion involving the ethics board. Mr. Tooley did a good job, and I'm not downing anything you said or anything anyone said, but you're not lawyers, and there's a lot of legal terms and legal statements being made, and I think that the attorney should be there to do this, not the council or council members or the mayor. If you are wondering, or there's a lot of questions about how it should be set up, St. Lawrence County has had a ethics board for a long time, and I would recommend that you would reach out to the St. Lawrence County attorney or the St. Lawrence County Ethics Board to see how it should be set up. I'm sure they know, they've been doing it for quite some time now. The only other thing I'd like to talk about is the DPW director spoke tonight about staffing and made a statement how a position was filled for the recreation director, but then is now out for hire because that position was, or that individual decided to be the facilities manager. That just seems kind of strange. I don't know who it is or who the individual is or whatnot. My question would be, who did the interviews for both of them different departments? And those are kind of two different fortes, if you will. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyways, thank you for the time, and have a good night.
Thank you, Greg.
I do not see any other hands raised, Mayor.
All right, next, I have several resolutions first. I'm going to make a resolution to adjourn to executive session, whereas City Manager Fonda Cronus requests an executive session with members of the Augsburg City Council to discuss collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. And whereas New York State Open Meetings Law permits City Council to adjourn to executive session for such purpose. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council adjourn to executive session to discuss collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of Civil Service Law. Be it further resolved that any action resulting from this executive session shall be taken in open session. I so move.
Second.
Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tully,
Yes.
approved.
Resolution to adjourn to executive session, whereas City Manager Fonda Cronus requests an executive session with members of the Augsburg City Council to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And whereas New York State Open Meetings Law permits City Council to adjourn to executive session for such purpose. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council adjourn to executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. And be it further resolved that any action resulting from this executive session shall be taken in open session. I so move. Second. Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tully,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
approved.
Resolution to adjourn to executive session, whereas City Manager Fonda Cronus requests an executive session with members of the Augsburg City Council to discuss proposed pending or current litigation. And whereas New York State Open Meetings Law permits City Council to adjourn to executive session for such purpose. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council adjourn to executive session to discuss proposed pending or current litigation. Be it further resolved that any action resulting from this executive session shall be taken in open session. I so move.
Second.
Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Scamperly,
Yes.
Counselor Stevenson,
Yes.
Counselor Trim, Counselor Weaver,
Yes.
Mayor Tully,
Yes.
Counselor Selly,
Yes.
Counselor Powers,
Yes.
approved.
Resolution to adjourn to executive session. Whereas City Manager Fonda Cronus requests an executive session with members of the Augsburg City Council to discuss the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property. And whereas New York State Open Meetings Law permits City Council to adjourn to executive session for such purpose. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council adjourn to executive session to discuss the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property. Be it further resolved that any action resulting from this executive session shall be taken in open session. I so move. Kathy, please call the roll.
Counselor Stevenson?
Yes.
Counselor Trim?
Yes.
Counselor Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Tully?
Yes.
Counselor Selly?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
Counselor Scamperly?
Yes.
Approved.
And we do not anticipate any action following executive sessions. So I'll make a motion to adjourn from executive session.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting be adjourned after executive session.